We will move to the next lecture with Dr. Nagib Qadi, who is the director of the Neuroscience uh, Department in King Faisal Specialist Hospital Research Center. Dr. Nagib, one of the pioneer in Alzheimer, he one of the first one who has a Alzheimer clinic in King Faisal Hospital in Saudi Arabia. Dr. Nagib will enlighten us about the prevalence of Alzheimer disease and the global impact.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be in front of this elite crowd. I'm thankful to the organizing committee and the Saudi Alzheimer's Association to give me this opportunity. I would be grateful if we can have the slides on both sides. Unlike Dr. Haytham Al-Tayyib, I'm not that photogenic. Seeing him rather than the slides on that side must have been very nice, but for me it won't do the same magic. So if we can have the slides on both sides, that would really be great. I hope someone is working on that rather than just smiling. Okay. So today what we are going to talk about is the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease and the global impact. And it's very humbling that I gave this talk around more than a decade ago, even though I'm very young. But it's very humbling how much things have changed over time, and we'll go through that. So the outline is, we'll be talking about the dementia, what's the definition, and the global estimates, the Saudi estimates, the incidence and prevalence of Alzheimer's disease and other dementia. We talk about the projects, a projected percentage change in dementia until 2050, new and old cohorts, prevalence and incidence, healthcare burden of Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, annual cost, and financial burden. I'm not sure if we are able to do the slides on that side. And I'm really grateful for you to be changing the chairs every time after every lecture. Thank you very much for your hard work. I think so we are coming there. Okay, very good. So if we talk about dementia per se, what is dementia? All of us have prior intellectual capacities. So we have a higher mental function. Higher mental function gets divided into the cognitive aspect and the behavioral aspect. And when we talk about the cognitive aspects, we have 5 subdomains, which are the language, memory, executive function, visual spatial domain, and praxis. All of us have that. We all have lapse of judgment, lapse of a decision-making time. We might forget on occasions. But when do we consider an individual having dementia? So you have dementia, or a person has dementia. Thank you very much. I'm grateful to you. So a person has dementia when the daily function is impaired. So if an individual is not able to perform a daily function, this is when we consider a person having dementia. Now, if he or she is not able to perform the instrumental activities of daily living, we'll consider it the mild form of dementia. And when they're not able to perform basic activities of daily living, this is a moderate dementia. And when they are bedbound or totally dependent, we'll call it severe. So now, it's very well known, different cohorts have different numbers, but the most common cause of dementia across lifespan is Alzheimer's disease. The only exception is when you talk about less than 65 and East Asia, some trials showed it could be frontotemporal dementia, but basically Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. And when we talk about the mixed dementia, we are talking about basically Alzheimer's disease with vascular burden. And frontotemporal dementia, amazingly enough, is the second most common cause in less than 65 when an individual is young. If you're talking about an individual who is more than 75 years old, then Lewy body dementia becomes the second most common cause, usually. And these have been across the ACCORD study, across different cohorts. Now, we all saw it today in the earlier talk as well from the Alzheimer's Disease International acting director. So the estimated growth number of dementia is really progressing from 2019 to 250. And you would appreciate that around 55 million individuals have had dementia in 2019, and they will continue to rise. And by 2050, between 139 to 150 million, depending on which statistics and what criteria you're using, will have dementia. At the moment, every 3 seconds, someone in the world developed dementia. And when we talk about the financial burden at the moment is around $1.3, $1.4 trillion. And that's not a joke, that's huge. And it's expected to increase by 2030, in the coming 7 years, and more than double to around $2.8 trillion. And this will have a huge impact because it's just continuing to rise every year. You would appreciate that dementia numbers, usually 2/3 of dementia numbers are around 60% to 2/3 in developing countries, or what we call as low and middle income countries. And you will appreciate that there is an increment around doubling of cases between 2015 to 2050 in developed countries, which are below in the lower side, while the upper side, the orange color, you will appreciate that the increment will be more than 3 times. And this is why the low and middle income countries have a greater increase in the number of dementia. If you look at North Africa and Middle East, you will appreciate that in 2015, around 2.5 million individuals had dementia. And it is exponentially rising, and you will appreciate that it will be 4 times more in 2050, around 10 million individuals or more having dementia. So this is something which has been quite a pandemic for our region and our countries. When we talk about Alzheimer's disease per se, most of the data, this report was more on USA based, but you would appreciate that in USA, for instance, at the moment currently in 2020, and now it's around 6.3, 6.4 million individuals have Alzheimer's disease. And it will continue to increase, and by 2060, around 14 million individuals will have Alzheimer's disease. It's not dementia, it's Alzheimer's disease per se, which is the most common cause of dementia. And you would appreciate that as the longevity is increasing because of the better healthcare facilities, you would appreciate that more than half, or significant increment in the individuals who are aged 85 or more. So at currently around 2 million individuals aged 85 or more have Alzheimer's disease, while in 2060 around 6 million individuals or more will have Alzheimer's disease. Some easy facts before we go further. If you look, these facts came in just recently, a couple of months ago, and it was appreciated that 1 in 3 seniors die with Alzheimer's or other form of dementia. And around 11 million individuals in states, they provide unpaid care. They are caregivers for patients who have Alzheimer's disease. A lot of hours are lost. 16 billion hours are lost for work. That is nearly equal to $272 billion lost in giving care to the patients who have Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Currently, as we said, 6.1 million individuals have Alzheimer's disease. In COVID, due to COVID-19, there was an increment in the individuals who had Alzheimer's disease by 17%. At the moment, the burden of dementia is $321 billion, and by 2050, it will be more than triple, around $1 trillion, if we are not able to curb it or not able to find a cure. In fact, in the last 2 decades, you would appreciate that heart disease deaths decreased by 7.3%, while in Alzheimer's disease, it increased by 145%. And more than 80% of individuals don't know what an MCI is. And this is what a dear colleague of mine, I think Dr. Taimel Meghil, he's going to talk about the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease and others. This is Saudi statistics, which was last year. We have, the population is around 36 million individuals. And you would appreciate, amazingly enough, men are more than women, and the increment is more in the age between 35 to 55. Most of the population is there between 25 to 55, and more when we come between 40 to 50. And these are our baby boomers. So in the coming few decades, they will all shift into more than 65 and into an older age. And this is where catastrophe could occur if you do not have a clear plan. So this is one of my residents did this slide for me, quite funny, so I liked it. Interesting enough, we have only one prevalence study, which was done by Dr. Loiba Sudan and Dr. Khanezan's too. I thought it was Dr. Khanezan's number double, but no, there are two different Dr. Khanezan. Dr. Mohan Al-Khanezan, he was the lead, and Dr. Abdul Khanezan. So the three of them, they did the only prevalence study we have in Saudi Arabia. And an amazing paper, they found the prevalence was higher in more than 60 years. It was 6.4% for dementia, even though the prevalence worldwide is 4%. But the latest data, which I'll show you in a while, is going exactly with what prevalence they found. Of course, I respect and love them, but my respect increased even more. So if you look at this is, when we talk about incidence and prevalence, some people ask me, what is an incidence, what is a prevalence? Basically, prevalence is the number of patients who are having a specific disease or a condition at a certain time. It could be a point, we call it point prevalence, or it could be a period, and we call it period prevalence. While incidents are the new cases which will come, or who will develop this disease or condition over a period of time. So when we talk about incidents, we roughly, during my time when I used to do residency, when the earth was cool, we used to say that roughly after Alzheimer's disease, the prevalence doubles every 5 years. And initially at around 60 to 65 is 2%, and around 90 years is around 50 to 60%. The later data has shown something very specific. There is something unique about this. So it has shown that worldwide, if you combine all the countries together, the doubling is at 6.8 years. So at 6.8 years, every 6.8 years, nearly every 7 years, you have doubling of dementia. Now, if you look at these countries, HIC means the high-income countries. East Asia, North America, and the LMIC means the low middle-income countries, and Western Europe and Latin America. These were the ones who had a very good incidence studies done, and they found that the high-income countries, their incidence is quite high, and they continue to have significantly high incidence, and you would appreciate that their incidence is around, they double every 5.5 years, while other countries such as if you talk about the low medium income countries, they double at around 8.5 years. So it really matters a bit. Now, if you look at the incidence of Alzheimer's disease and other dementia, which it was recently, it came out, so you will appreciate that currently worldwide is the black color, then red is the ladies and females, and men are the blue color. And you would appreciate that always we consider the usual, roughly women to men is 2 to 1, because Alzheimer's disease is more prevalent in ladies. The numbers are pretty much that, but with some slight change here. If you currently the incidence is around 2.9 million cases have the Alzheimer's disease, and it will continue. The incidence will increase in 2020. So you're talking about within a period of 30 years to around 7.5 million individuals. Now, if we talk about the age standardized incidence rate, and you would appreciate that again it will continue to rise a bit, but in men, if you look at the middle picture, I wish there was a pointer, but if you look at the middle picture, and you will appreciate that for the men there is a significant jump. So in the last 10 years they have found that the men are having, there is more incidence in men. And if you look at the right side, which is C, we are talking about the social demographic index. You know, every country, they look at the social demographic index according to their health, fertility, and their healthcare. So you would appreciate that globally, among 100,000 individuals, the age standardized incidence rate is around 93 to 94. It is quite high in high middle socio-demographic index and in the high socio-demographic index. Saudi Arabia is considered as the high middle socio-demographic index. And you would appreciate this. This is a world map, 206 countries, and you would appreciate that the most significant age standardized incidence rate change when you talk about is in the Middle East and North Africa, and thereafter in the Far East. But you will appreciate that this is something significant, and at the moment the rate is around 117. So Middle East and North Africa are having the most highest incidence of developing dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Now we look at the prevalence. The prevalence is again increasing, and at the you would appreciate in 1990 around 20 million individuals having it. At the moment there are around 55 million individuals. Pretty much the same for men and women. They are both increasing, but again you would appreciate that the increment in men, if you look at the middle picture, the age standardized prevalence rate is higher. So in the last decade, men have suddenly started to have higher numbers. And if you look at the picture in C, you would again appreciate that the high middle socio-demographic index countries have the highest increase, and thereafter comes the high socio-demographic index. And as I told you, Middle East is the high middle socio-demographic index. This is an age standardized prevalence rate, which recently came a couple of months ago, and again showing the 206 countries. And yes, many countries, the prevalence is quite high, but you would appreciate, amazingly enough, Middle East and North Africa have the highest number. But the highest, of course, is Turkey, and thereafter, it was, in fact, specifically mentioned Kuwait, Bahrain, and thereafter Saudi Arabia. And this is more work done by the 1066 Dementia Group and others. And also, the quite high is in China as well as in States. But so the idea behind this is that our country, our region, the incidence and prevalence rate is very high, and this is very worrisome. Now, if you look at the death numbers had been around 500,000 deaths per year, and they will increase to, they will around triple, or more than triple, around 1.6 million, and it has happened over the last 3 decades, so it's already there. And you would appreciate that it's pretty much the same for ladies as well as men. And the last slide, it is quite busy, but you would appreciate that socio-demographic index was not attributing to the cause of death. So people die in all the countries pretty much the same. So this is, again, a map which shows the age standardized death rate, and you would appreciate that we, unfortunately, in our region, we are not doing that well. The worst is Afghanistan. However, looking at our region, we are not that far away, and it is really impacting us as well as North Africa. Now, if we talk about the projected change, so this was an amazing slide, amazing paper which came in Lancet Public last year, a couple of months ago, and it was talking about the change between now and 2050. So in the coming 3 decades, what would happen? And if you would appreciate, the shocking part is that the maximum number of change in dementia is going to happen in the Middle East and North Africa, especially the Middle East. In fact, the percentage change is the highest, is around 367%. And another, when you correct it, it shows it reaches around 400% increment. And I even showed you that the dementia in previously it was 2.5 million, and by 2050 we'll have more than 10 million. So that is a significant worry. If you decompose it and try to understand why is this happening, you have different reasons for why there is an increment in increase in the percentage of dementia. Is the population getting older? Is the population getting more? Is there a change in the GBD? You know, GBD, when we talk about, it's the global burden of the disease. Is it a change due to education, which should be a positive change, and the total percentage change? So you would appreciate, again, the worst is something in the middle. I wish I could show you with a pointer, but if you look at North Africa and Middle East, if it's clear for you, you would appreciate that the population aging is significant, population increment is significant, and the education part is quite high. So we don't have a problem with the education. So it's a protective mechanism. But even with that, the dementia cases are going to be the highest in our region. So, which is quite a pandemic. The biggest effect was in the sub-Saharan Africa, where the population growth is more, and the individuals who had the maximum benefit is in the high-income Asia-Pacific as well as the Western Europe. They are doing quite well. So we have to really tackle it very well. Just as a trajectory, if you are able to develop a treatment by 2025, which would delays the Alzheimer's onset by just 5 years, and we had an amazing by Dr. Taib, who mentioned a lot of things are ongoing, and I'm sure a lot of positive things are going to come in the coming few years. If you're able to just delay the onset by 5 years, 5.7 million people will not have Alzheimer's in 2050. That is around $600 billion benefit. Now, coming to the other part, many of the cohorts, they do, you know, a study which was done previously around in 1970, 1980, 1990, and thereafter they did the follow-up cohort in 2000, 2010, and they compared them. And when they compared them, it's a very unique part. Now you are seeing the numbers. It's 1, 2, 4, 0.5, and 0.25. So they are dividing the new cohort on the old cohort prevalence. And if the prevalence is pretty much the same, so the number would be 1. If the prevalence is increasing, the number would be more than 1. And if the prevalence is decreasing, the number would be less than 1. And you would appreciate, apart from Japan, apart from the Hishiyama trial, everything else has shown nearly, except for the Gutenberg trial or the Bordeaux, some of that, but they have shown that there has been a decrease in the prevalence. And these trials were basically done in the Western Europe, in Central Europe, USA, and they have shown that there is a significant decrease in the prevalence. Now, someone would say, why is there a decrease in the prevalence? And the reason for that, there isn't a specific point why there is a decrease in prevalence, but it could be the better medical facilities, education, healthier people. You can look at my health. I'm really healthy. Now let's forget the part that I do exercise or not. But I mean, individuals are really, the new generation is becoming quite healthy. And so the disease burden is decreasing. The cardiovascular diseases are decreasing. So all this helps. And that's why the prevalence is decreasing, especially in the Scandinavian countries, in Central Western Europe, as well as in States, and the East Asia, even though our numbers are getting really worse. If you look again at the incidence estimates of new divided by the old cohort, same idea, you would appreciate everything is on the left side. Everything nearly is on the left side, except few things like Bordeaux for men, and you know, some trials which went, and when they did a clinical diagnosis, even though when they did an algorithmic diagnosis, everything is on the left side. So that means the incidence is again decreasing in Western Europe, in East Asia, as well as in States. And unfortunately, it's increasing in our region because we are not going more, so we have to really look into the health part, even though our education is really good. If you look at the gender difference in incidence and prevalence, it was clear that for men, there is a decrease in prevalence, while the incidence, not 100% there. And if you look at at women, it wasn't really 100%. There was some decrease in some trials, but others did not show that. Even though the incidence, there was a decrease in incidence rate. All of these, as I told you, is from the Scandinavian, Europe, UK, Spain, as well as USA. This was just to show that the life expectancy still for women is more than men. Okay, one of my last slides, estimated dementia prevalence. So this was a recent trial, and it showed in China, the prevalence is just increasing, and it will nearly triple by 2050, exactly like our region. Our region will quadruple, while it has been really going down. If you look at Japan, and if you look at UK, and it has been just a modest time of increment in USA. When we look at the percentage change in death causes, this is just to show you that the death causes by Alzheimer's disease is significantly more, while everything else is going down. And when you look at the chronic diseases, how many ER visits are done, Alzheimer's disease has a significant burden, more than stroke and heart failure. And that, I personally was not aware. I knew Alzheimer's is a burden, but not to this extent. And if you look at hospital stays, so if a person has Alzheimer's disease or dementia and other comorbidities, they tend to stay longer in hospitals. So what does this mean? So the final part of my presentation, we are talking about the economic burden. So that means there will be a significant economical burden. But let's talk about the risk factor impact. So the risk factor, we have 3 risk factors, which were the main, the high fasting plasma glucose, the high body mass index, and smoking. And you would appreciate that the high middle socio-demographic index is unfortunately not doing well in high body mass index. Well, I represent that. In smoking, I don't smoke, but many other colleagues are representing that. And this is a problem. We need to really tackle this issue. And I promise to tackle it more after seeing this slide. So if you look at the 8 standardized DALY, DALY is the disease when you talk about how many years are lost, either by mortality or by morbidity. That's DALY. So you would appreciate that there has been, again, a significant decline in the high middle socio-demographic index, which is our region, as well as the high demographic index. So the yellow color and the lilac color. I'm not really good with colors. I have, to some extent, some color, but I hope I'm saying the right colors here. Okay, and this slide, it was more of like showing the difference between men and women. For men, it was more of the smoking being an issue. For women, it's more of, to some extent, a high body mass index. So if you talk about the global aspect of DALY by age, you would appreciate that. Look at the light blue color, which is Alzheimer's disease, and the dark blue, which is stroke. So stroke and Alzheimer's disease significantly affect individuals. Stroke being the main culprit in 60 plus, in 50 to 60 plus. And when it comes to around 80 years and beyond, 75 and beyond, it's Alzheimer's disease. And it's the same for women as well as men. But in men, Alzheimer's disease, as I told you, dementia is picking up. So it's even worse than stroke. So among the last things mentioned is the annual cost of dementia. So how much economical burden is there? We talked about trillions of dollars. So it also depends, are you a high-income country or a low-income country? So in altogether, which is the red color, it costs around $27,000 US dollars per individual for a year. And it also depends on the stage. Of course, the developed countries are more. So if the stage, if it's a mild dementia, it will be around 15,000 or 16,000. If it's moderate, it will reach to 28, 29,000. If it's advanced, it will reach to more than $40,000. That's why we try to diagnose them earlier. We try to make sure that they have a better life, and less we have to tackle with less of the issues in the advanced stage. It's pretty much the same. It's also showing the global spending of dementia per person relative to the economic development. And again, the highest is, highest numbers are being by the high income and the upper middle class income countries. Now, if you think about the LIC means the low income countries, lower medium income countries, upper medium income countries, and the high income countries. We are in the upper middle income countries. For the world, the expenditure will increase, and it's expected by 2050 to be around $17 trillion. Now look at, the problem is us, the problem is the green color, and look at that. By 2050, it's expected that $10 billion or $10 trillion will be spent by these countries, which are the upper medium income countries. This, I believe, is the last slide, and it's again showing the economic burden between 2019 to 2050. And you would appreciate that, luckily, alhamdulillah, we are a rich country, so the burden is there on us. But other countries, especially the East and Russia, they will be significantly having issues. But if you think about Saudi Arabia as an economical burden, you will appreciate that in 2030, around you will appreciate that if you talk about the age, Alzheimer disease and related dementia, you will appreciate that for Saudi Arabia it is 11,496, and while in 2050 it will be around 29,830 million. So mind-boggling number which will be spent on dealing with Alzheimer disease and related things. So as a conclusion, Alzheimer disease and related dementia is a pandemic. Currently, 55 million individuals have dementia, and by 2050, between 139 to 150 million will have it. North Africa and Middle East, around 10 million of them will have it in 2050. Projected incidence and prevalence is among the highest in the Middle East. Economic burden is significant, $17 trillion by 2050. Our area will be hit significantly. Dementia risk reduction can balance out growing old age. That's why we need to look at the preventive measures and cure. Now, just as an acknowledgement, we were the first to start the behavioral clinic, cognitive behavioral clinic in October 2019. Why is this time important? Because it is the time when Alzheimer Association was launched. Both of them were launched at the same time, October 2009, and we are still doing better. We are more of multidisciplinary and a really strong multidisciplinary team. I would like to thank you here. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And just to mention that we have, because I had promised one of my colleagues, we have an MS Walk, and the MS Walk is on 8th of February, and I have a dear young doctor here, Dr. Noura Al-Yahya, and she is a champion for that, so hopefully you can come for the MS Walk. I wanted to run away from it, but because I was getting an invitation, and after seeing the slides, I'll start walking and losing my weight as well. Thank you very much.